All righty. Good evening. Good afternoon. What are we talking about? Evening. We are live right now. I'm going to wait for you guys to populate just a little bit. Let me pop this up here on the screen. Make sure you know you're in the right place. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good Thursday so far. Yes. Good afternoon. I've got. It is technically afternoon. Correct. This gentleman, Abraham Bonowitz, he is with me here today. He'll be up here in just a second. Hey, Veronica. Good afternoon. Glad you could join us. And I will say, let's just get right to it. And people, feel free to comment and question any kind of questions or comments. You can feel free to pop in there. Hey, Abraham. Good afternoon.
Greetings. Thanks for having me on.
No, this is awesome. There's been a lot of, I'm sure you already know, a lot of, more recently, there's been a lot more chatter about Melissa. And still not enough, I think.
We need to build a fire on this. And I'm glad that you had that conversation with Sabrina the other day and came to understand a bit more about it.
Yeah, and it's bothersome to me that some folks had never heard of it until I started kind of talking about it, getting into it more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your take on that? Why wasn't this, like front page news? I mean, this is somebody in our community down here locally. She was from our neighborhood.
Well, a lot of people knew about the case, but once the trial's over and the person is sent off to prison, it sort of falls off the radar. But what's interesting is we're meeting people that were aware of it, of the case, when it all happened, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's been coming out of the woodwork is people that have actually gone and taken the time to see the film, The State of Texas versus Melissa, and then realized that, all I knew was what the media told me, and all the media told me was what they got from the police and the prosecutor. And because when we're talking about going after a poor person, even if they're guilty, there's nobody advocating for them or telling their side of the story.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Melissa. I mean, here was a person that didn't have any defense, any resources for her own defense.
Yeah.
And comes from a poor community, and just all the cards are stacked against her. And so, and plus you're in jail. There's nothing you can do. If you did have any money, they freeze your accounts. And if you don't have an advocate, then what you're getting is nothing.
Right.
Getting a public defender who has 15 other cases, or a person who is an attorney that does other kinds of work, but happened to be in line for the next case that the judge was going to assign, or as we believe now in this case, an attorney who's in cahoots with the prosecutor and just wants to help them, seal the deal, so that in this case, the attorney ended up with a job in the prosecutor's office immediately following this trial after not bringing in all the evidence that they could have. That's one of the newest things that we brought out since the conversation you had with Sabrina is documents from the Child Protective Services that, so Mariah was in foster care. And at that time, so under the guidance of or the oversight of Child Protective Services in foster care, she fell and hit her head and knocked herself unconscious. And the documents don't say how long she was unconscious, but they say they treated it with Tylenol and an ice pack. And
so that happened in foster care.
Yeah, prior to coming back into Melissa's home. And the other thing is that she also, the foster parents requested from CPS the permission to restrain her. Why did they want to restrain her? Because she was knocking her head on the floor. Repeatedly. Okay, so we don't know how many head blows she took, but her cause of death on the death certificate is traumatic head injury, something like that. And how many hits did she take even before she got home? And then she gets back to Melissa's house, and the the siblings who are helping take care of him. One of the siblings punched her several times, and it has admitted to doing that. We don't know exactly how she fell down those stairs, or if she was pushed, or she fell. What we do know, also, again from the CPS documents that were not brought out in court during the trial, what we know is that she had some sort of malformation in her legs that were turned, and that made it. That's one of the reasons why she would fall. So all of these things then speak to how she ended up with the injuries that she did, and how they appeared to the coroner, and how they're now explainable when you have forensic scientists who look at it. And all that is detailed in the film. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a forensic person. I'm not a physician. But I can read and I can watch the film. And that's what we're asking people to do. It's why the catchphrase of our campaign is watch the film.
Right.
Because we can talk for 2 hours, and that's what it would take to just walk through all the things. That's why we're saying watch the film, and then you understand. And even if you don't know, and you don't have to know if she's innocent, we believe that there's no crime that actually occurred, so there's nothing to be guilty of. And, even
with the exception of, anybody would say obviously negligence, perhaps, but that's not a death penalty.
That's not a capital offense,
right? Yeah.
And the negligence is why the children were removed from the home in the first place. That had to do with her being in extreme poverty and being a drug user and all that sort of thing, which nobody denies. However, you have to ask the question, okay, what miraculous change of behavior did she exhibit that allowed them to bring all the children back into the home that had been removed? And it's probably because she had these head injuries and they didn't want to be responsible for it. But what the reason we believe, I believe, my organization believes, we're not the attorneys in this case, we're advocates. Right. The reason that we believe that the defense attorney did not bring the children in to testify as to what they saw, what kind of behavior, because they would have testified that there was no ongoing child abuse.
And that's Peter Gilman that we're talking about.
That's right. And the reason I didn't bring that in is because as soon as you bring in a witness, both sides look at everything they can find about the witness to try to be able to either discredit them or understand who they are. And they would have come up with these documents from Child Protective Services. And the question would have been asked, what happened that changed her behavior that allowed them to bring the children back in? We can't answer that question. I haven't seen that documentation because it probably doesn't exist. Our theory is they didn't want to be in custody of Mariah anymore because she had these injuries and she was, so whatever happened. And that's, and my point again is by watching the film, by looking at what we now know, whether or not you believe Melissa is guilty of something, what we know is that there's too much doubt to believe that there was an intentional murder. And I believe, having watched this, having looked at the documents, having met a lot of the people involved, a lot of people in Melissa's family, it is pretty clear to me that no crime occurred. And instead, what happened was this corruption that was going on. Villalobos, Armando Villalobos, the prosecuting attorney in the county, had recently lost a big case, and he needed a big win because he had an election campaign. And, what better than to put a child killer on death row, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what they did. And again, there's too much to read here, and but it's spelled out in the film, and you can see there's too much doubt, and this translates in so many cases to how the death penalty plays out in a lot of ways. It seems like, for example, right now there seems like there's an epidemic of people that actually have real questions about their guilt.
Yeah,
that are getting execution dates. And why, to go back to your question that you asked to begin with, why haven't we heard about it? It takes resources. It takes time. It takes somebody who knows how to get the word out. That's why we're involved with this, with the family. John Lucio in particular, we started to connect with him on Facebook. Let me just back up to say that in January last year, Sabrina Van Tassel, the director of the film, the state of Texas versus Melissa, reached out to us and asked us to help her promote the film. And I had already been hearing about it from other advocates, saying, "Hey, you got to look at this film and help get the word out." So I watched the film and I talked to Richard Ellis, Melissa's attorney, and he was like, he agreed to participate in. Excuse me one moment, Isaac, I'm on the phone. I'm on the thing. You need to be quiet, please. My son has come in. He's on spring break.
That's all right.
Let me shut the door real quick.
Everyone, this is Abraham Bonowitz. He's with the Death Penalty Action page. It's they're on Facebook, Death Penalty Action. Yeah. And he's also an advocate to get Melissa a new trial, perhaps get her freed up. And he's here talking with us today.
Sorry about the noise.
Okay.
It's so and by the way, I didn't see it's Bonowitz, Bonowitz.
Oh, what did I put on there?
Well, you said Borowitz.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's a common thing. It's okay, just mentioning that. But in any case, what we have is well, yeah. So Richard Ellis, the attorney, still Melissa's attorney.
Yeah.
I spoke with him last January. He was all about the film. He was willing to participate in talkbacks and that sort of thing. And then something shifted, and suddenly the defense team didn't want to really be promoting the film. So that's on them. I don't know. Can't really get a good answer about why that is, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that we didn't see any reason why we couldn't continue to promote the film. And I mean, it's out there on cable TV, and you can stream it on all kinds of services. Now you can watch it if you have a library card. You can watch it through the system at your public library.
Right. I did put that link up there a couple days ago. I forget the name of it now, but I'll post that again.
Well, if you just go to freeMelissaLucio.org and click to just scroll down to watch the film, then you'll see all the different ways that you can watch this film on many different channels. So millions of people are seeing the film. And we negotiated with the distributors for 2 days of free film. We had a free link on our webpage to show the film that 1,700 people clicked through to watch it on that free link. We did that around International Women's Day, which is March 8th, so on the 7th and 8th. And it's a lot of different ways to reach out. What our goal has been to reach more Texans, to invite people who live in Cameron County in particular and in Texas to communicate with elected officials who can make a difference. And who are those people? The county attorney, Louis Sines. And then if the courts do not intervene, and that's what the lawyer's job is to try to get the courts to intervene and stop this and allow her to have a fresh look at what evidence there is against her, which if they actually do that, we'll see there is no evidence and she'll come home. She'll be freed. If the courts don't intervene one way or another, then it's going to be up to the governor. And the governor has this gatekeeper called the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles. And I call it a gatekeeper because that's really how it's set up.
Yeah.
It's not about justice. It's not about taking into account all of the different things that could be mitigating factors at that point in a case. And I say this frankly because since 1982, there's been 573 executions in Texas and 3 commutations, which can only happen with the recommendation of the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles. The governor does not actually have the power to act without a recommendation. And that's why our message for over a year now has been to the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, watch the film. To the county prosecutor, watch the film. To the governor, watch the film. Because we believe if you watch the film, you understand that at the very least, there's too much doubt to execute.
Yeah, and it's like I said, we were talking about the only thing that people heard early on, very early on, was woman, murdered, child, and that was it. And then all of a sudden there's a trial, and 3 or 4 days later that's over. And next thing you know, I mean, that ball moved very fast. Well, and it's funny how I looked yesterday, how many people are on death row, and it's a gigantic list of some people from the 70s are still on death row right now. So why is she being fast tracked all of a sudden? You have any, what are your opinion on that?
Well, that's the question that Sabrina Van Tassel has been asking is, why the fast track, just to make sure people understand. I mean, cases move at different paces, right? But I don't know exactly why they're trying to move this one along. I do know that there's a number of people who are eligible for death warrants at the end of their cases. I don't have the numbers on exactly how many there are. We also know that there's 8 or 9 people that had been scheduled for execution whose dates had been postponed either because of COVID, or we're out of that now. Nobody's worried about that anymore. But then more recently in the Ramirez case, this guy had argued not that there was any other reason to stop his execution except that he wanted to have his Christian pastor in the death chamber with him, laying hands on him, praying out loud. And that is against the regulations according to the Texas Department of Corrections. That's the challenge that actually got the U.S. Supreme Court to say, oh, hold on, we're not going to execute that guy yet. We're going to decide whether you have a constitutional right to have your Christian pastor in the room while we're killing you. Okay?
Yeah.
And a pastor of your choosing, perhaps. I'm not sure if that's actually a part of that litigation, but we know how it's going to play out. And the reason we know how it's going to play out is because in Alabama last year, there was a case of Willie Smith, who had the night of his execution, there were still 2 different motions pending at the U.S. Supreme Court, 2 different arguments. One was whether he had the intellectual capacity to understand what was happening to him and why, and to have been able to assist in his own defense. And 2, whether he could have his Christian pastor of his choice in the death chamber with him when he was being killed. Those were the 2 arguments that were being made. He was supposed to be killed at 6 p.m. It was around 9 or 10 p.m. that the Supreme Court ruled no problem executing him because of his intellectual disability, documented intellectual disability. Go ahead and kill him. But he has to get his pastor with him. And because the state of Alabama had changed its protocol to not allow for any clergy people in the death chamber with the prisoner at the time that they're killing him, because they changed it, they couldn't carry through the execution. They sent him back to his cell, and they ended up killing him this past October. Now, just another sidebar. Why did they change the protocol? Because a couple of years before, a Muslim being executed wanted to have his Muslim cleric in the death chamber with them, and they certainly weren't going to do that. So they just made it so nobody could have their cleric in the death chamber with them.
Right.
So anyway, the state of Alabama was ordered to fix that. They did, and Willie Smith was killed this past October. Okay, so that's how we know the U.S. Supreme Court is going to, we have a really good sense. We don't know what they're going to do until they do it. But when they do that, they're either going to say to the state of Texas, you must let them have their cleric, or no, you don't have to. Whatever happens, either way, the state's going to be able to go forward. Either they have to let the cleric in the death chamber or not, but they're going to go forward with that execution. There's no other challenges no other legal challenges to why he should not be killed. When that happens, that's going to open the floodgates with all the other people that have made that argument.
Right, exactly.
There was another guy, Michael Gonzalez, who was supposed to be executed on March 8th. And this is the interesting thing that we all need to key in on. He did not make that claim about wanting his pastor in the room. He didn't care about that. But what happened was the Odessa police had handed over evidence that actually could show that he's actually not the killer in the case. Any testing that could be done. So here we were just days away from a guy being executed, and he got a stay, and he's going to get another, it looks like he'll get another turn in court to be able to look at real tangible evidence. There's actually a picture of the jacket with the blood that needs to be tested and all this stuff. That evidence was held away from the defense, right? Sitting in a police locker all this time. And here we are 5 days before the execution. And
that's so wrong. I know.
Well, that's the thing. So if you believe that we shouldn't execute innocent people, then, and you recognize how many cases there are where we've executed them and we believe that there's another case from South Texas, from deep South Texas, the Carlos de Luna, the movie in that case came out after he was killed, but it's called The Phantom. You should watch that film too, The Phantom, about Carlos de Luna. Turns out he's innocent too. Can't prove it because we can't take him back into a court of law. But there's a number, if you look at the Death Penalty Information Center webpage, deathpenaltyinfo.org, and click on the tab about innocence, they've got a list of all the 186 people that have been exonerated and freed, and then a list of people who, they were threatened with another trial, and they agreed to plead guilty to a lesser offense or to not plea.
I saw one. There was a woman a few years ago. I think it was one of Sabrina's documentaries on YouTube, and she pleaded. They looked at her case again, and she pleaded no contest.
And then they let her go on time served. It's would that have been about Sonny Jacobs? Do you remember the name of the person?
Oh man, I'm trying to remember. It was a female.
There's just a handful of females that are on the exoneration list or who have been executed in this country. I mean,
the reason they want her to plead no contest was that she could not sue for compensation, and that killed that possibility right there.
It's a face-saving move for prosecutors too. That's what they'll do when they have no evidence, but they have you by the short hairs, and they can say, look, here's the door, or we can try you again.
Right.
And they know, and if you're shown the door and you've been on death row or in prison for years and years, and you can walk away today, or maybe get convicted and sent back to death row, which happens. Kirk Bloodsworth, the first guy exonerated in this country from death row using DNA technology. His conviction had been overturned, and he'd been resentenced to life in prison on reconviction. But originally he was sentenced to death, and he was totally innocent. The DNA proved it, right? And he was convicted twice. And this is a honorably discharged U.S. Marine. Ray Crone, honorably discharged U.S. Air Force, and he was convicted twice. Kerry Max Cook, convicted 4 times before he finally took that plea. Because and that was in Texas too. What is the risk of getting reconvicted? I've already been convicted 4 times. It's crazy how this works. Okay. Or rather, well, we should say it's crazy how the system fails us, because it's not a justice system, it's a legal system. It's not about justice. And part of that is because, a defense attorney's job is to represent their client to the best of their ability. A prosecutor's job is to do justice. And sometimes doing justice means recognizing that we've got the wrong guy.
Yes. Now, for some not aware of the process, a lot of people are criticizing Governor Abbott right now, but I'm trying to express, and Lynn Marie Garcia was with me the other day, and she also kind of tried to explain it. It's the governor has no say in this right now. I mean, he can have his opinion personally, but he's got no legal anything. He's not allowed to until, like you said, that moment where it gets turned back to him.
Yeah. And what I believe is the case is that the deadline for the lawyers to file their clemency documents is 8 days before the execution is scheduled. So Melissa's execution is scheduled April 27th. So, April 18th or 19th, they'll file that stuff. And we were hoping that a copy of the film will be included in that filing. Technically, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles doesn't have to look at, or maybe they can't look at anything that is not specifically filed. I don't know the details of that. I'm not an attorney, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to hear about this just reading the newspaper or watching the news. That's part of why we're doing the actions that we are, is to educate the jury pool, to educate everybody that, wait a minute, there's some doubt in this case. And for $2.99 or free, if you have a library card, you can watch this film that spells it all out. And there's more on top of that. So what the governor can do is whisper to his appointed Board of Pardons and Paroles and say, I want this one. And then he get a recommendation that he can grant a commutation. And that would be what I don't know also. Not my job to know, but I'll try to find it out, is exactly what can the governor commute to? Because the commutation is a lessening of sentence. Can he lessen it all the way to time served?
Right.
He cannot declare a person innocent. He can grant a pardon. He can, he can't declare innocence. It takes a court to be able to do that. That's what people don't recognize is when you go to trial for whatever your charge is, you're not found innocent. You're found guilty or not guilty, right?
Right.
And it takes a special process to go and get a declaration of actual innocence, which is a whole different thing. And I live in Ohio, and here in Ohio, the lawyers now know when we have an exoneration, before they leave the courtroom, they ask the judge for a declaration of innocence, because they have to have that in order to go and get the compensation that's available from the state.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I did want to bring up a couple of questions that are up here. Richard and Selena, son and daughter of Melissa, go live on TikTok. They do it quite frequently. And they say that Melissa was abusive. What are your thoughts on that? Sabrina did not use their interviews for the documentary, and she did explain why she didn't use those interviews. Do you have any insight on that?
The interviews that Sabrina did with Selena were not flattering to Selena, and that's a part of why. But when you make a documentary or a film, you're shooting many, many hours of footage, and then you have to decide what fits, right? And Sabrina made the choice not to include that. But because Selena was making these accusations, Sabrina released that footage, and it's available now on YouTube. Maybe you can find it.
Yeah.
With the link out. I think it's really unfortunate what's happening, and there's different theories about why these children of Melissa's are arguing things that the older children say was absolutely not true. But that's not my argument. And all I can tell you is that it's very, very divisive, very, very painful for everybody involved. And we just ask people to watch the film, because that's the way you can see what we know. And even those kids who are making those TikToks, I'm told, because I haven't watched them and I don't need to watch them, even they say that Melissa shouldn't be executed. Okay? Right. And being a child abuser, if she was, which we believe she was not, but if she was, then that's still not punishable by death.
Yeah. What are the possibilities? Why haven't we know why right now, but is there any possibility that the foster parents that probably caused some of these injuries will get visited at some point?
I doubt it. I don't know. And I would say that, I don't believe there's any evidence to suggest that the foster parents did anything to create these injuries, but they were faced with a child who fell and was unconscious, and that's the challenge. I mean, my kid we're up to 27 stitches on my son's stitch count is 27.
Yeah.
Every one of those injuries is something that could have been prevented if I had been standing there in between him and the coffee table, him and the wall, there was one time he was seeing how high up the stairs he could get and jump down, and he bonked his head on the ceiling where the transition from upstairs to downstairs. I told him to stop. He didn't. I didn't go get in his way. So I'm responsible for him cutting his head open, right? Should I go to jail? He likes to walk on. Mine's the kid that instead of swinging on the swing set, he's walking on the top of it, right?
Yeah.
And on one hand,
or trying to go around a complete loop.
Well, yes. And I too. When I was younger, I enjoyed things where if I messed up, I would die. Motorcycle riding, jumping out of planes, things like that. And so there's a certain level of thrill seeking that people do. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that, you can't control when your kid's going to trip and fall. Right. And, was there negligence in this particular instance? My understanding is that Melissa and her family was moving. So she's probably out carrying boxes and stuff and tasked a sibling, with watching Mariah. And the door at the top of these rickety steps was supposed to be fastened, and it wasn't. And she went through the door and fell down those steps, or might have been pushed. We don't know. Doesn't matter. But we do know she was not deliberately murdered. And if you want to say it was negligence, negligence is not punishable by death.
Right, and that brought up this question: did the negligence play part in the death? And then you think about, well, it depends where that head injury came from. Was it from that fall down the stairs, or was it from foster care? Weeks before.
It goes back to what I was just saying about, my kid's first 3 stitches came from him running back and forth and falling and hitting a coffee table. He got his eyebrow. That's what we call it, because he was right in his eyebrow. So he called it his eyebrow for the longest time. This is when he was 3 years old. I'm sitting there right on the couch watching him run back and forth. He was running back and forth to grab some M&Ms, and he just tripped on the carpet, hit his head. I'm responsible for that, right? I was watching my kid running back and forth, and I didn't stop him from running back and forth, and he slipped and tripped and cut his head. That's what we're talking about with negligence, because I didn't see that injury was possible, and I didn't go and stop him physically from doing that back and forth. And I think that's the same kind of situation that we're talking about here. We can ask why were the children removed from the home and in foster care, and that has to do with an inability to properly care for children when you're in extreme poverty. And proper is all relative. And it also has to do with the fact that Melissa was a drug user, right? But for whatever happened, they decided that she was well enough and corrected her behavior enough to give her back her kids.
Return the kid, yeah.
So is CPS negligent? Right? We should be asking that question.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to find fault, but nobody wants to recognize that, or few of us want to recognize that, wait a minute, maybe the system just got it wrong.
Yeah.
And maybe we can stop this from going all the way over the cliff.
And it was said that Mariah was born with drugs in her system. She tested positive for whatever the drugs were. That doesn't matter what they are. They were drugs. Some people were not aware of that. And a question was asked of Richard last night as he was on TikTok with Selena. And it turns out she was not the only one. There were 4 of the siblings that were born with drugs in their system.
Well, that's how it is when you're a drug addict and you're having kids and you're in extreme poverty. I'm not making excuses for that. It's not a capital case.
Last night, yesterday, Selena and Alex were live in the afternoon. They kept saying they never saw bruising on Mariah because Melissa had her in sweaters and pants all the time. They weren't visible.
I'm not in a position to debate this stuff, right? What I can tell you is, if you watch the film, what the forensic scientists say is that there's evidence that after death, these bruises come to the fore, right? She had bruises on the bottom of her feet. How does that happen, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's a torture that they use in places like Turkey where they beat you on the soles of your feet. Falaka. Right?
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about. Okay. If you want to know, if you really are asking these questions and you haven't watched the film, that's what you got to do first. And you don't have to agree with the findings of the film, but talk to any scientist and see if what those that are in the film are saying, if that makes sense, if that's documented, if it's peer reviewed and peer tested. That's how you know. That's how you trust the science, is when multiple people can do the same kind of tests and get the same results.
Yeah. And you definitely have to. I've been urging people to give it a viewing. Watch it once. Watch it. I've watched it in the last week. I've probably watched it 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
And just to make sure I heard things right. Now, there was a claim by, I know you said everybody wants to point the finger. There was a claim that one of the daughters, which was Alexandra, kind of boastfully told the investigator, in this case, Lynn Marie Garcia, "Yeah, I did it. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna lock me up?" Or I forget what she said. But I did it. She kept saying that. She said it, and
that's probably an explanation for why she's making these statements and TikToks, because she wants to draw attention away from herself. But again, that's other people saying that. I'm echoing that concern. I think that it's really. It's at this point, it's he said, she said stuff. It's the question we have to ask is because if you've never sat through a criminal trial, especially for a severe crime, I encourage you to go down to the courthouse. It's public. Go and sit in the courtroom and watch.
Yeah.
And I sat through some of these trials. And before anything comes in front of the jury, it's tested and discussed, and the witness is sometimes interviewed outside of the jury. And the judge decides what questions are going to be askable, what questions can be asked, what the witness can testify to, and what they can't, based on that pre-interview. And when you sit through and watch if you're in the public and you sit there in the courtroom, you can watch all of that questioning and see what they allow, what they disallow, okay, before they bring the jury in, and hear just the part that they decide is allowed.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that the evidence that they're not allowing to be testified to is wrong. It just means that it doesn't meet whatever the bar is that's set by the judge to be allowed, right? So there's so much more information in there. But in this country, we are not Saudi Arabia. We are not the Taliban. We are the United States of America, and we have a U.S. Constitution. And that's what the tool that is used, except that that's the tool that is used to guarantee your rights under the Constitution, except that even that can fail us. And how does that fail us? I'll tell you. In Melissa's case, last year, her conviction was thrown out. Her death sentence was thrown out by a panel of 3 judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And then the state appealed to the full court, which was 17 judges voting in that case. And they voted 10-7 to reinstate the conviction on the death sentence. Okay. And then the case was brought up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear it, which is really not even a reflection on that particular case. It's a reflection of, do they want to address the case law that they were asked to look at? Appeals are they're not about guilt or innocence. They're about, did we follow the letter of the law? Did we cross the T's? Did we dot the I's? So you're going to hear people say, well, she had 7 appeals. Those are not about guilt or innocence. She's never been able to get a fresh look at the evidence in order to be able to determine, is what was thought 15 years ago really what we know now to be the truth?
Yeah.
And that's the argument that's made in the film. Now we know there's a different picture here, and especially when you take into account the corruption.
Yeah, that's the other thing. The Mr. Gilman, it almost seemed like he, you watch a documentary, you're gonna get the same creepy feeling that I got. I mean, it's almost like he was working for the DA, not for Melissa Lucio.
Well, he was working. He was working to get a job with the DA, because what happened as soon as the trial was over?
He did, yeah.
And he's still there in that office.
Some have even told me that he actually got hired before the trial was even over. That there was a working that he was already hired.
That's how that's what we saw. Melissa was a poor brown woman, drug addict. Who cares? She's trash. Throw her out. We can use her for our campaign to create a win. We can say, hey, we're good. We got the child killer on death row.
And what they count on is that, well, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to care. We're just going to go do this. Nobody's going to speak up, or they're not going to notice. They're just going to hear murder, drug addict, death penalty, and that's all they're going to hear.
Exactly. And that's where my organization comes in, right? We're at the end stage, but we're not at the place where it's all over. Okay. And so when I say we come in, I started to tell this before, we started noticing John on Facebook, John Lucio, Melissa's oldest son, and we started reaching out to him. We did a program because I saw he made a Facebook post about how joyful a visit was that he had with his mother just before Christmas. So I invited him to come on we do a program like this, where we just have conversations. I invited them to come on and talk about finding joy on death row. About the experience of being, because, when you got a loved one on death row, you're on death row. And all of that, which goes into, all these questions, which go into how do you deal with having a loved one facing execution and on death row, because it's super painful and traumatic on its own. But then we got to, connecting with John a little bit more. And when Melissa's date was set for execution at the end of January, I called up John and I said, hey, can we help? And he and others in his family wanted to be able to speak out and be heard and raise this in the court of public opinion. Okay, the lawyers are doing their own thing, but they didn't want to sit on their hands anymore. They looked around and saw Rodney Reed's got a campaign, Julius Jones got a campaign.
Yeah.
How can we have a campaign? And that's where we said, hey, we can do this. So death penalty action came down. I think I've been down there 4 times so far since January 27th, and we'll be down again Monday night in Brownsville, and they're all week next week. And then we'll be in San Antonio on the 26th and Austin on the 27th and the 28th, raising the profile of these voices. And what we've been able to do, we did a media tour. That's how you know us, through the freemelissalucio.org webpage, which we just set up in a matter of days once John said, yes, please. And we've gotten on the front page of all of the news organs in Cameron County and that whole, and the Rio Grande Valley, repeatedly educating people about this and asking people, just watch the film. Don't trust us. Watch the film. See what they say. And then we've been in the news all over the state too, and around the country. And that's only going to grow. And that's our work, is lifting up the visibility, lifting up voices, asking people to ask questions. Make sure that what you believe to be the truth is actually the truth. And and really, especially to people, we have a banner that we use sometimes. It says, "Do you trust the government?" I mean, if we can't trust government to fill potholes properly, or to tax us fairly, or to roll out a vaccine for a pandemic virus, then can we really trust them with the power to decide who can be killed?
Yeah, that's unfortunately we have to ask. I remember when I was young, and perhaps things were then the same back then when I was a kid. But I remember thinking, dude, you got a jury, you got lawyers that are really fighting for their people, and the prosecutor, and they're going like this. But it's not always like that.
Manny, have you ever been charged with a crime?
I have not.
Okay. You probably know somebody who's been charged with a crime, right? Yeah. If you have the ability to hire a lawyer who will walk you into the police station and through that process, your justice is different than if they just come and scoop you up. I've been arrested a number of times for nonviolent civil disobedience protesting. Okay, so by intention. And a few of those times, in particular at the U.S. Supreme Court, if you get arrested for protesting at the U.S. Supreme Court, you're going to spend the night in jail. Okay, if you're arrested by the Supreme Court police. And then you're put into regular lockup with all the other people that were scooped up overnight. And it's astounding how many people, the police don't even show up to say what they actually did the next day during arraignments. And a lot of people were just released because there's actually no evidence. They would just scoop them up because they were drunk or whatever. But again, my attorney, who we had retained ahead of time because we knew we're going to jail, he was able to come visit us in jail. And he was able to advocate with the judge for us during arraignment to get us released on our own recognizance and all that sort of thing. Now, granted, we're going into doing nonviolent civil disobedience, but the same is true if you've got a domestic violence charge or a drunk driving charge or whatever it is. If your lawyer if you have thousands of dollars, and that's what it takes to retain a lawyer for a simple misdemeanor kind of crime or a low-level felony, at least a couple $1,000s to hire a lawyer to walk in with you, your justice is different. And especially if you're charged with a major crime, then it's not just a couple $1,000s. A retainer can be $25,000 or $50,000 or $100,000. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't have that, your justice is different than somebody who does have that.
Yeah.
And that's what we all get to wake up and understand. Because if you believe, the bedrock foundation of our legal system are the 4 words carved into the face of the United States Supreme Court building. Do you know what they are? Most people don't. Equal justice under law. Okay.
Yes.
That's the bedrock foundation. Then money shouldn't matter. What county you're killing shouldn't matter. What skin color you are or what skin color the victim is shouldn't matter. It should only be the precision the precise charge of what the crime is, and that should be all that's looked at. But all these other things make a difference in the outcomes. Okay. And if we have a system that treats people differently according to money and race and the politics and geography of county prosecutors, that's who decides how to charge and who is responsible and pays for prosecutions, are county governments, right? Well, if you go to a more rural county, Texas has what, 254 counties, I think?
Something like that, yeah.
Only about 40 of them have sent anybody to death row. Has there never been a murder in those other more rural counties that don't have the tax base to be able to prosecute?
Yeah.
Many people may remember the murders in Jasper County. Those three men that dragged Mr. Byrd on the back of the truck and dragged him to his death. And, it was awful what happened. Well, the only way that was prosecuted is because the federal government stepped in and prosecuted it as a hate crime, because Jasper County would otherwise never have been able to afford, even one capital case, let alone three.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here is we have to set aside the concept that there are people who deserve whatever they get coming. And there are. Set aside the concept of that from the practice.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm going to tell you, we don't even talk about, I thought when we started this conversation a few days ago about doing this, it was going to be a conversation more about the broader death penalty issue.
Yeah.
Melissa's case is a really great case to use to examine the death penalty because there's so many errors and problems with it. But I started out the first time I was confronted with this issue in favor of the death penalty. It was in an academic setting. I'd gone to a meeting of a group on the campus of Ohio State University. The speaker was talking about the death penalty, and I argued with her. I said an eye for an eye. I said, this is the United States. We have the best justice system in the world, and if that includes the death penalty, fine with me. I'll pull the switch myself.
Yeah.
That's what I said. And I set out to try to prove those people wrong. And in trying to prove them wrong about the death penalty, I found out that everything I believed about it, the truth was the opposite. I thought it was fair. I thought we always got it right. I thought it only got the worst of the worst.
Yeah, it's not like that.
And I was mistaken. So that's what I ask people. Don't take my word for it. Look at it for yourself. But at the end of the day, we have to set aside the idea that there are people who deserve whatever they get coming and look at, can we trust government with this power? Can we trust them to get it right? Can we trust government to be fair?
Yeah. Question that came up. Was Melissa's plea guilty or did she plead not guilty?
I don't know the answer to that question. I presume she pled not guilty. What we know is, and if you watch the film, you can see the same interrogation that we all saw. What we saw was that she was badgered. Number one, I'm saying this especially to the mothers out there, but any of us who have been with a mother as she is enduring pregnancy, which for many people it is an enduring and an endurance exercise. So she's pregnant with twins. So we all know what that means. When you're making a baby, all kinds of energy goes into that. So here she is, 6 or 7 hours of interrogation. It's the middle of the night. She's not getting food. She's not getting water. She's not getting sleep. And finally she says, I guess I did it.
Right. I saw that.
And so many of those people who've been exonerated from death row had confessed to the crime that they were accused of. Okay. Why did they confess? Because of this interrogation that insists we're not stopping until you agree. Okay. And so what Melissa said, I guess I did it.
Yeah.
And that's not a confession.
No, it sure isn't.
But that's what she was convicted of. There is no other evidence that actually points to there even being a crime.
Now, one question came up. It was more of a debate. People were accusing Sabrina. Well, this is all one-sided. This is all one-sided. And my argument was that it's a documentary. It doesn't have to be unbiased. I mean, you look at any documentary for whatever the topic is, and they're leaning one way or they're leaning a different way.
Sabrina is a journalist, and
yeah,
everybody is perspectives are informed by their own experiences and what information they've gathered. I have come to know Sabrina over the past year, and we got to travel together when we did that media tour. She's a very serious individual, and she's putting her own reputation on the line here with this and with other documentaries. She's not putting anything in there that can't be verified and proven.
Right.
And especially when you find that you're looking at a mountain of evidence. When you're looking at a mountain of evidence, then you are, that shows one thing, and it's very easy to move towards that mountain. And the mountain here that Sabrina found, having read all the documents, was that, wait a minute, there was no crime. The crime is that she's on death row and facing execution. And here's Maribel saying, but the child could have been taken to the ER. Yes.
Yeah, that was my thing when John did speak this last week. I was kind of doing like I did last night. They were on their own TikTok live, and he was stating that. Oh no, I think it was on the another video with
they recorded the podcast while we were in Dallas.
And that night that he was there, he said that she was cold. He thinks she was gone already.
Well, again,
how do you walk away from that? How do you just leave?
What I can tell you is that the child fell. How many of us have the money it takes, right? They didn't realize that her injuries were what they were. The bleeding or whatever it was internal. You couldn't just see an open gash in her head. She didn't have any open wounds, as far as I'm aware. And, so they laid her down to sleep. And John actually talked about this in that podcast that just went live, and you can find it on the Free Melissa Lucio Facebook page. He talks about that he came and visited and went to see Mariah the night before she died, right?
Yes.
And he did not have the wherewithal and the state of mind that he was in to say, oh, she's anything more than sleeping, and he certainly was not in a position himself to be, for whatever reason, to be the person to take her to the hospital. And he's kicking himself today that he did not take her to the hospital.
Yeah.
I would question whether, due to the nature of her injuries and the time it was at that point, whether it would have made a difference.
Yeah, that's beside the point. And you're right. And it seems, just according to what he said, it seems that she was probably already gone. I mean, she was cold as a touch, according to him. And
again, I don't know. What I do know, and what is undeniable, is there's too much doubt for this execution to move forward.
Yeah. And
Melissa deserves, and here's Jose saying this, she deserves a new and fair trial. And you're right, Jose. We should all be outraged that she didn't receive a fair trial. We should be outraged at a system that allows this to go forward. We should be outraged at the fact that the prosecutor in this case used it to boost his election campaign, and then he went to prison for corruption, right? And now I just saw an article that even the current prosecutor has been accused of taking bribes.
Welcome to South Texas.
Yeah, well, exactly. And, Manny, we could talk about a different case every other day, just in Texas, and then let alone others. We talk about Rodney Reed. We can talk about, so many different cases, and we should. I'm happy to come back, and I'm happy to point you in the direction of other cases to look at. At the end of the day, we need to change the law. We need to make it so that prosecutors can be held accountable if they knowingly send the wrong person to prison or to death.
Yes.
We need to make it so that prosecutors are actually held accountable to doing their job and doing justice. And if they hide evidence and that sort of thing, which happened in this case, then that they'll be held accountable. We need to make it so that people who are facing death actually have the top level of attorneys at the trial and enough time to prepare at the trial, not 15 years later when they're facing execution.
Yeah, and I am a believer in the death penalty in an airtight, perfect, 1,000% perfect situation. There's a case down here, you may have heard of it. I believe his name is Rubio, is the defendant. Decapitated 3 of his kids
Yeah, he's getting a
Uh,
new hearing. Why is that?
he's getting a new friggin' hearing. He's being allowed other things to be brought
They
up.
caught him literally red-handed,
And he
right?
admitted it. He told the police, I did it. I just killed these kids. I killed my kids. Take me, handcuff me. I did it. And that was his opening statement as soon as police arrived.
And why is he not just taken out back and shot, right? And the reason why is because this is the United States and not Saudi Arabia and not the Taliban. And we have a different level of a different system that looks not just at did you kill this person, but how culpable are you? And people say, well, you're getting into the weeds here, but that's the challenge. And when and I too used to support the death penalty, but Manny, I don't think you might support the idea. That's what I was talking about. Set aside the idea that there are people who deserve whatever they get coming, and look at the practice. Yeah, that's why whenever there's one of these mass shootings, it's sort of a breath of a sigh of relief when we hear that the person was killed or killed themselves, because we're not going to be
having this debate. Yeah,
going to have to hear people call for the death penalty. But more important, and this is the other piece that nobody's really talked about, we haven't talked about either, is the other the collateral damage of the death penalty. What we do both to the families of the accused and also the families of the victims. Okay, one of my person who's on the board of directors of Death Penalty Action, her name is Sharon Risher, Reverend Sharon Risher. Her mother was one of the 9 people killed by Dylan Roof in that church shooting in Charleston in 2015. Dylan Roof, the racist white supremacist who's on federal death row, right? Well, he came up for his first appeal 6 years later, this past October. And Reverend Risher talks about how that was like reopening, like yanking a scab off, reopening the wounds, revisiting the trauma of losing her mother in that way. Whereas had he been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which I don't always agree with, but in that case I certainly do, then it wouldn't be coming up. And because there's no such thing as closure. The closure is a dirty word among victim advocates because there can't be closure. How do you fill that empty seat at the table when the family is gathering?
Right.
How do you can't give somebody back their life. So, what you can have is the ability to begin a healing process that doesn't wait until we kill somebody 15 or 20 or 30 or even 40 years later. And you mentioned this earlier in the show. There are people on death row who've been on death row for 40 years.
Yeah.
And when we tell the victim family, here's the other side of that coin, and we tell the victim family, wait till we kill the guy, and then you'll feel better. But we're actually telling that to this tiny percentage of victim family members. What do I mean when I say that? Well, I was the field manager in New Jersey when we had a campaign that abolished the death penalty in New Jersey, and we did that in 2007. Okay, now New Jersey's death penalty law was written in 1981 or 2, and between that day and 2004, there had been more than 600 murders that were death eligible. Okay, so not all murders are death eligible, but where there's a murder where they catch somebody, which is not all the time, of the people that they catch, where the crime is punishable by death because of all the factors that line up. So in New Jersey, out of all the murders that happened in New Jersey between 1982 and 2004, about 600 were punishable by death and went to trial. They sought the death penalty in 230 of those cases. Okay, not all 600 that were punishable by death did they seek a death sentence. They sought it in 230 of those cases. In those cases, they got a death sentence in 60 of them. Okay, so starting with 600, they tried 230 times. They got a death sentence 60 times. By the time we abolished the death penalty in New Jersey, 52 of those people had their sentences overturned. Not their convictions, but their sentences were reversed. And on a new sentencing hearing, they were sentenced to life in prison or some other level of incarceration. So that left 8 people. So just over 1% of the people who were punishable by death staying on death row to the point of dying there or being executed. Now, New Jersey never had an execution before we abolished it in the current era of the death penalty since 1972. So what we're really saying to the vast majority of victim families in this state and in this country is your loved one wasn't valuable enough because we're not going to seek a death sentence in many of those cases where we could, and we're not going to get it in many of those cases where we try. And even when we do get a death sentence, it's going to get reversed, and you're still waiting 20 or 30 years, before we even try to execute them. And then when we tell you, Manny, wait till we kill the guy and then you can begin to feel better, we're asking you to put your healing process on hold.
Yeah.
How is that helpful to anybody? Meanwhile, we're spending a bunch more money to seek a death sentence. And people say, well, speed up appeals. But guess what? That's why that county thing comes back into play, because you have to kill in a county that can afford a death penalty trial. Kill in a rural county, they can't even afford it. So if you kill in a county with the resources to do it, they're deciding, that prosecutor, that elected official is deciding to spend at least twice as much money on a roll of the dice that they might get a death sentence and might get an execution, where instead they could go for a conviction and whatever the next highest punishment is, which in Texas and most other states is life without the possibility of parole.
Yeah.
And then we're done.
Right.
The cost of incarceration is less. The cost of the trial is less. The collateral damage to the victim family is much, much less, because they can begin to move on and begin a healing process. And we could do much better for them if we were taking all those resources that we're wasting on the roll of a dice of whether we might get an execution, and instead put them into better services for homicide survivors.
Yeah.
And co-victims is a better way to put it, because we're starting the victim advocates movement. And by the way, I'm a victim advocate. I want better services, and I advocate for better services for homicides, for victim families, and victim friends. That's the thing. Co-victims recognizes, using that word, recognizes it's not just the blood relationships of a victim, but also their work and their friendships and all the people that know them. That when somebody dies, it's not only the person's wife that's crying, right? It's anybody that knows that person. And we have to recognize that and provide support for them if we can. And we could if we weren't wasting so much money on the roll of the dice of whether we might get an execution in 20 years.
Yeah, that's just crazy. So now let's go over to the original point of this program. What can people do to help? Someone who's sympathetic to Melissa Lucio in whatever their capacity is, whether it's the punishment doesn't fit the crime, or she's innocent, or she should be released totally. What are some do petitions work? Do they work? Do they count as something?
Yes and no. The reason that petitions work is because they're an organizing tool, and they galvanize people. And people come together around a certain thing, right? On a very rare occasion, do you get, they blow up and create so much energy that politicians can't help but notice it. That's the hope with this. And that's why we're asking everybody to go to freemelissalucio.org and sign that petition. Also go to the Innocence Project and sign that petition. But when you sign the Free Melissa Lucio petition, then you're invited to join the email list, and then we can reach out to you. Like just earlier this morning, I sent an email to over 1,800 people now just in Cameron County saying, hey, you can join the daily vigil that is happening from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in front of the county prosecutor's office. And this weekend, for the first time, we're starting this up. There will be visibility action. So we're going to be holding signs and big banners and that sort of thing at specific street corners. I just got that information. So we're going to be putting that out. And I'm going to tell you, since we're live here.
Yep.
Let's see. Here we are. So we're going to be, I think we decided, he didn't give me a start time, but I'm guessing it's going to be 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. probably on Saturday in Port Isabella.
Port Isabel, yeah.
At Queen Isabella Boulevard and Tarnava Street.
Okay.
Let me see if I put my glasses on. Sorry, I'm 40. Older than 40, so my eyesight is gone. Tarnava Street. So Queen Isabella Boulevard and Tarnava Street. This will be up on the calendar in a little while, and also on the Facebook page. And then on Sunday, we'll be in McAllen at Nolan's Boulevard and 10th Street. Okay. And then next week, every weekday, every day that the offices are open, will be from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in front of the Cameron County Prosecutor's Office, the administrative offices of the county courthouse in Brownsville. So people can come to that. You can sign the petition, and then when you sign the petition or you go on that web page, there's a tab to click on about how to contact government officials. And we're asking people to call the district attorney's office, also call the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles and the governor's office. We want this on their radar. And that does work. Public pressure and keeping that pressure on makes a difference, okay? If you want to do more, you can order a t-shirt and wear it, and you can print out the flyers and the signs that are available on the webpage and put them in your window, put them in your car window. If you have a business, put it up in your business, make a stack of flyers, put them on the counter in your business, share them with people, make a stack of flyers, wear a t-shirt, and people say, hey, what's that about? And you just hand them a flyer and say, well, watch the film and call these people. Yeah. That's organizing, and that's what we're doing. And you can join these visibility actions. You can join the Free Melissa Lucio delegation that will be in the Chavez March for Justice in San Antonio on the 26th. We're going to be at the governor's mansion on the 27th in Austin, and we're just building it. If you're a person of means, we're not charged. Well, if you order the t-shirt on the website, then yeah, you got to pay for that. But if you come to one of our events where we're there physically, we're not asking for money. We're just giving people t-shirts to people who will wear them. We're giving all these signs that you see. We've raised the money, and we're giving them out to people that will use them. That's in-person stuff in Cameron County. But if you can help us make more, if you can help us cover the cost of these t-shirts, we can make more, cover the cost of these signs. If I had enough money, I'd be putting up billboards at every billboard available on the route between the district attorney's home and his office. So he has to see it every day on his way to work. And for the governor too. That's what we have to do, is wake people up. And we're looking for that game changer, Manny. If there's somebody that can drop 5 figures or 6 figures into this campaign, it would change the whole world. Yeah, and we're looking for that. So the way to reach us is at freemelissalucio.org or info at freemelissalucio.org or info at deathpenaltyaction.org. We've raised a fair amount of money, and we've spent every dime of it doing these trips around the state and producing these materials and putting them out there. And if we had more resources, we would do more. So that's another thing, is just go to freemelissalucio.org and make a donation, as much as you can afford. There's no set amount. It's as much as you want to invest in stopping an execution.
There's supposed to be a parade, the Julio Cesar Chavez parade coming up. Are you aware of that at all?
Julio Cesar Chavez?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Cesar Chavez. I keep referring to the boxer.
Yes. Well, I'm aware of the one that's in San Antonio on the 20th.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Everyone somewhere?
I mean, that's probably the one.
Yeah.
Some of her family has been saying, she was, I don't know if this is true or not, said that she was going to make some kind of disruption there. I'm talking about Selena.
Well, good luck to that, because the one thing that we know about the folks organizing that is they have a very robust security system in place. And if you're causing a disruption, you might not find yourself in the crowd anymore. But that's not a threat, though. I'm just saying that's the expectation I would have in that community. We're happy to have the conversations with anybody. But if you're going to come and make threats, if you're going to come and threaten violence, then you should expect to be, removed.
Could Biden pardon her?
Joe Biden has whoever the president is, whether it would be, the previous president or the next one or the current one, has no capacity to intervene in a state death penalty case. Now, we are asking President Biden to live up to his campaign promise to abolish the federal death penalty. That's another thing that my organization is working on. In fact, Death Penalty Action was created in 2017, right when Donald Trump was being inaugurated, because we recognized that he is a big fan of the death penalty, and we would soon be seeing federal executions again for the first time in Mateo, I love that suggestion.
Yeah, me too. That's funny.
The answer to that is yes. So if you want to give us pay off these people and have them do what's right, then fine. No, we don't want to be in that corruption.
I know it's funny, but it's sad that that can happen. Yeah.
So in any case, the Trump administration came in and we saw 13. Donald Trump became the most executing president in the country since Roosevelt. More than 70 years, and the first since like the 1880s was the last time that a president had carried out a federal execution during the transition period, during the lame duck period. So we were started to confront that. That's what we did. And then now there's legislation to abolish the federal death penalty. It's called the Federal Death Penalty Prohibition Act, and that's in the U.S. Congress. So if on our webpage, deathpenaltyaction.org, there's a petition you can sign, and also a letter writing action. You click on it, and it'll take you to where you put in your address, and it tells you who your members of Congress are, and then you can send them a letter saying, hey, get rid of the death penalty, the federal death penalty. So we're working on that. We're working on other cases around the country. There's 2 executions scheduled on the 21st, one in Tennessee and one in Texas. And then Melissa's on the 27th, and then and then depending on what happens with the Ramirez case at the U.S. Supreme Court, there may be a whole slew of executions in Texas. There's a case that was just being heard, a trial, I should say, about the question of lethal injection and whether that's constitutional. And that's a whole other program that we could have. Some experts to talk about that question. To us, to our organization, it's not about how we kill our prisoners, and it's not whether they might feel a little bit of pain on their way out. I mean, we don't want anybody to be killed, but for us, it's not the question of how we kill our prisoners, but that we do so when the system is as broken as it is. It's not about who committed the worst crime. It's about who committed the crime in a county that can afford it, with a prosecutor that's willing to seek it, where the victim was white most of the time. I mean, that's where the real racism is in the death penalty, is in the race of the victim. Most of there have been now some executions of people who murdered people of color, black or brown or Asian, but 80% of the people who've been executed in this country, which I think is now 1,542, I think, approximately, 80% have been executed for murdering white people, even though people of color are the victims of murder in this country more than half the time, right? So where's that racism? And are people concerned about that? That's where you can see it.
Yeah, it's been said that people were racist against Melissa, and I mean, I would hate to think that's true because they were Hispanic. I mean, the DA was Hispanic, so
I mean, it's where the racism exists is when it's more classism and well, number one, if she was a white person of prominence, they never would have been seeking the death penalty in the first place, and they might not have even been seeking a conviction. But because it was an easy mark and they needed somebody to prosecute in order to get a win as part of the election campaign for Villalobos, that's why Melissa Lucio is on death row. It's why she's facing execution.
Tell me, how often are you folks meeting out there at the courthouse? Is it 5 days a week or a couple days a week? Or
every day between now and the 27th that the offices are open. So I don't know if we have any more federal or state holidays in between there, but as long as it's not a holiday, it's Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then on the weekends, we'll be bouncing around the county and having, just high visibility actions for a couple of hours on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, holding our signs, just raising awareness and being together and giving the media an opportunity to cover us, which is how we really reach people, because, we might reach a couple thousand people who might see the message and understand it if we stand out there for a couple of hours. But if the media comes and tells the story, even if they don't even get it right, but they show our signs, then we're reaching tens of thousands of people each time they do that. And that's what you call earned media. And that's what we've been doing a lot of. And that's how we know how a lot of people, have come to understand about this case. I asked you earlier if I could show a short video. Is that possible?
Sure. Yes, it is. Yep. You should be able to share it there, and then I can pop it up on the screen.
Yeah, let me just where is that? I just have to find it real quick. It's a video that I made when we did when the bishop of Brownsville of the diocese of Brownsville came and spoke out, and there was a man there, and I'm just digging up that video. There's a man there that came and he shared that here it is. He had believed that Melissa was okay. So let me just share my screen now. If I can figure out where that is. Here we are. No, that's not. Oh, that's what it is. I keep forgetting I had to go to a different browser. Okay, so now I can hit share. It's giving me all these tips.
Yeah. Is it a video on YouTube?
It's a video on
your drive or on a page?
It's on
oh, Facebook. There it is. I see it now. Well,
are you able to?
Well, you're actually sharing the wrong thing. You're actually sharing a feed of all this right here.
Yeah, I need to figure out how to get that to. Does that make a difference?
Well, not right now. You have to unshare it. Just stop the sharing and then start over with selecting the what you want to share.
Okay, there we are. I just got to get it up. There we are. Okay, stop. And now, yeah, it's a new system, everybody. I'm not a moron. Just
no, that's all right.
Okay. Now, let's see if I share this and just go to here. Do you see it now?
Okay, I can see it on your Facebook page. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's on the Free Melissa Lucio Facebook page under videos. And I guess we'll see. Let me know if the sound works.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
My name is Nacho Garza, and I'm from Brazil. 15 years ago, when I heard what had happened with Melissa, and I heard the news that she had killed her baby and she had gotten the death penalty, I said she deserved it. Little did I know that I was hearing fake news. I was trusting what the news told me, so I went along with it. That's why it is very important to watch the film. I watched it, and I'm convinced that she is innocent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
You able to hear that?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so that's, and there's so many stories like that. That's one where I happen to be able to catch it. But let's see, I'm going to stop my screen. There we go. That's the bottom line. Just watch the film.
Yeah. I urge you, for those who haven't seen it, I know I've been saying it the last few weeks, watch the movie, watch the Hulu, or wherever you get it. There's a free site available. I posted that a couple of days ago. All you need is a library card or a university ID, school ID, and they'll let you watch it. It's called The State of Texas versus Melissa. And if you have any doubts, in my opinion, that pretty much clears up a lot. And yes, there are questions still, but definitely she does not belong on death row. That's for sure.
She should be home. She should be free.
Yep. Abraham, I appreciate your time. I really do.
Well, Manny, I would be happy to talk with you more about this and other cases, and I'll be coming back down to Texas. I'll be there from next Monday evening until for a week. And
okay. I'd be glad to hook up with you. I'm considering meeting the group you got out there at 11 o'clock sometime this week and come out and even do a live program from there and just show what's going on. Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to do that.
It's not a high traffic area, but people are walking by. What we know is that the memo went out or somehow the message was put out in the courthouse to don't engage with those people, which means that we're actually making a difference in being heard.
Yeah.
Because we're there and they're telling our people to don't talk to us. Why not? It's just
it's just a peaceful demonstration. That's all it is. It's the epitome of the word peaceful. It's not violent in any means at all. And they're not. You guys are not saying cause a disruption. You're not saying any of that. You're just there to show the signs and get people to watch. Ultimately get people to watch the movie and then get everybody to start to think. And I'm not just saying that because I had Sabrina on, and it's I'm not. It's not that. I don't have rose-colored glasses on. It's not that. Watch the documentary and you'll actually see, and then then talk to me and give your opinion. If you haven't seen the movie, watch the movie.
Please. So thanks everybody for watching. Please do, Manny, I really appreciate your keeping that URL up and sharing with people how to connect with us, and seriously, if you're watching and you can help us be more impactful, that's where you can donate. That's where you can show up to take action yourself.
Yeah, sign the petition. There are 2 petitions, one for freemelissalucio.org, one at the Innocence Project. One's got more than the other. It doesn't matter. It doesn't take you 30 seconds to sign a petition. Just sign both of them.
And if you're Catholic, there's also an action on the webpage of the Catholic Mobilizing Network, catholicsmobilizing.org, which is, and a lot of organizations just create their own. And that's fine, as long as we all do something.
Yes. Abraham, thank you once again. And I got a feeling we'll talk to you again sometime in the next few weeks. We'll any updates or whatever that needs to be done.
Send me your address. I'll send you one of these.
Awesome. I'll talk to you right after the show.
Cool.
Everyone, thanks for spending a part of your day, your midday, whether it's on lunch or your home or whatever you're doing. We do appreciate it. Get the word out. Share these videos. It's very important that people hear this. The media, in my opinion, is not doing enough. And if all of us can just share this information, watch the movie and all that, perhaps we can make a difference just from down here in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone, thanks for hanging out with us. I'll talk to you guys later tonight. Abraham, thank you. There you go. Stop executions now. And everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you.